Would you be willing to share your sling test numbers with me?
I'm just trying to think maths. I think I once did 20.5 kilos on my pinkies. Yeah, in a crimp position. And
for reference for people, I tested my pinkies in a crimp position, and I think my max was 9 kilos. So Aidan's got 11.5 kilos on each pinky on me, which is pretty amazing.
That's definitely, it's not consistent for all my fingers.
Yeah.
Like that was
well, you're also one of the best boulderers in the world, and I'm hoping to climb V12 someday, so there's a big gap between us, so it makes sense. But yeah.
But I think also if you were to look at our other fingers, there'd be a lot less disparity. Because
okay.
I know my indexes were much weaker. I think I maybe did like 16 kilos on my indexes.
Okay.
My middle two, I can't quite remember. I don't think I ever really went those completely max. So I'm a bit unsure about my exact data doing that. I know the thing which isn't always common with when I added it all up. So I've done it using like picking up weights off the floor using a sling, or I have like a little like mono, which I kind of made. So it's like measurable, the depth that my finger goes into the into like the hole you pick up. But I have done it on a force plate before, like doing like the mono crimps, but almost not entirely hanging, but you like pull down on it and it's attached to a force plate so you can measure the force. I did this like I've started working with, well, for the past 3 years I've been working with Ollie Tor when I was like transitioning to just being a rock climber. And so it's been quite interesting because they obviously do a lot of testing, and I think it is quite interesting because usually they would get correlations from that data and try and determine like what people could be climbing. When they see trends in the data, they'll like establish like a algorithm so that if you input your data that you should be able to predict how hard you can climb. And I think I'm probably a bit of an outlier in that system, in that I'm probably a bit crap on like the tests. So I think we did a few tests, and like initially it was like kind of confirmed what I knew, and he was like, oh yeah, like you're not crap, but like you've definitely got a long way to go in this. But then we started being a bit more detailed with the data. I know when we tested my individual fingers, I should try and maybe if we do a follow-up one, I'll try and get the data off Ollie.
That'd be awesome.
We did do like the individual fingers and added them up, and I think it was quite dramatic. It was like 160% of the force I could produce when all of my fingers were together.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Which, yeah, it's quite strange. I remember being a bit confused by it. Being able to produce a lot of force in that position, like in isolated fingers, I think is quite helpful for outside, where the holes are often less ergonomic. So like
less uniform.
Yeah, lots of the time hold manufacturers understandably make the holes comfortable, whereas Mother Nature isn't often never so kind, and we end up crimping up on the crystals.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Purely out of curiosity, because I think of you as someone who has like some of the strongest fingers in the world, but as we've been talking about, it's very specific to the style in which you climb. How strong are you on like the Beastmaker 2000 center edge? Just for context for people.
I probably haven't really tried it in the past couple of years. I basically don't really use that edge. I use like the outside ones more so. Essentially, I found with that edge as well, your pinky ends up doing so much because it's big enough to like kind of nestle a lot of like the skin on the edge. I found it was like trash my pinky skin, but I also found that you'd need quite a big hole outside to have the same like impact. So I don't really test, or if I would hang on it, I'd have my pinky like retracted to the edge because it felt much more applicable. So I guess like maybe for like a little gauge of where people are, it would be good for me to try it. But I would always focus on like the outside edges, which are much smaller, and you just be on like the tip of your pinky. But like on the outside edge, like it would take a good day for me to hang it body weight, like I can probably like, yeah, on a good day, I could probably do 5 seconds body weight on that, but I wouldn't really be adding weight.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that is surprising when comparing you to someone like Magos or something. I mean that's a really big difference.
And I think in the past, part of me has been a little like embarrassed about that. I'd be like, oh, like these people all think I've got strong fingers. I can't show them that I'm terrible at this. But yeah, my passion doesn't lie on a fingerboard. Or, my goals on those wooden edges. But
credit to you.
No,
well, I don't want to spend too much time here because I had a whole 2-hour podcast with Dan Varian about the sling test and this really geeky finger stuff. So I want to get back to your rock climbing. Actually, I feel like I should close the loop on this. I do have one more question. When you found out that your index fingers were weak relative to your other fingers, what did you do to address that, or what are you doing to address that?
So I definitely initially, when I've discovered it, I was using like the mono crimping as like a training tool, not just a testing tool. So I did actually hammer that quite a lot, which did make a difference. It was quite good. And I'm still a bit, essentially, I think the risk of doing it is like, it can be quite injury, like you can be quite susceptible to injury doing it. I think if you're really measured, it can be helpful. So I did do that quite a lot, which I did notice a big difference, but I started like, essentially the way in which I'd then apply that strength was in a front free crimp, or like a front, climbing without your pinky basically, when the hold's too small to allow it. And so that was kind of like what I wanted to get better at. So I definitely initially got my fingers, I'd had quite a prolonged spell of like training my index with a mono sling, and that like did get them quite a lot stronger. But I feel like the familiarity of like, I did a lot of training in like front free half crimp position, and I'd usually do that 2 arms added weight. And usually my go-to has always been to use an edge as small as I can before skin becomes a limiting factor. So generally actually I'd use that the outside edge on the Beastmaker 2000s.
I think that's like 13 mil maybe for people listening, something like that. Kind of pretty rounded though.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's enough so it's like, it's rounded enough so it's very comfortable. I don't lose any skin, but like I'm very much on like the pad of my fingers, so I'm not like using any extra assistance. And so I'd kind of like train in that position, because it also felt very unnatural for me to drop my pinky, or like I felt like quite exposed, like exposing your ring finger was like, it felt quite risky for me, or like it felt very unnatural for me. And so I was quite slow, like progressing into that. And then I also like focused quite a lot on like in that like front free half crimp position, not like kind of rotating my like thumbs towards me, which would like load my ring finger more, and like take load off my index. I focused on like internally rotating my hands, so like I'd like make sure that I was like keeping weight on my index, so like I wasn't just using what was good to like kind of take weight off what was weak. So I've kind of like played around with that.